Welcome back. It's Friday, January 5th, 2024. And Fridays are a day I'm really looking forward to. I mean, maybe even a little bit more than Wednesdays, although I do like opening those boxes. But Fridays, we're going to be doing our knots. And I know some people are like, knots? But, I mean, it's just that, knots are so important in survival. I mean, and there's different types of knots. You've got you've got stopper knots, bend knots, binding knots, hitches, and knots are like so important to survival of anything because if you have to set up a tent, you're gonna have to know your knots. If you have a tarp shelter, you gotta have to know your knots. And I think that it's important to know the right knot for the right job. And so, I mean, you may have to travel downriver, and so you have a boat. Well, you better have the right knot to secure your boat, otherwise your boat leaves you and you're stuck. And so I think that knots are a lot of fun, and and so just a fun day for me because I love knots, and I mean it's like you've got I've got cordage of all types, so we'll be able to and we're gonna do like close-ups. So the videos on Friday are gonna be a little bit different because I want you to see if we're moving the knot in a certain way, if we're moving the rope, you have to be able to see it up close. And we'll discuss every Friday we'll discuss the type of knot, whether it's a stopper knot, a bend knot, a hitch. We'll discuss, what are some, useful aspects for that knot in a survival situation. We'll go through the knot a couple times, and I think that this is something that is overlooked. I've looked on YouTube and I can find a couple knots here and there, but nothing really extensive on how to tie knots. And so, I mean, it's kind of silly, I know, but I mean, I think that it's something that's very, very important, and so many people, it's like when they tie a knot, they just do, a couple quick like overhand knots and they tie it. And then when it comes time for you to untie it, it's a mess. And if you knew how to tie the right knot at the right time, it'd be so much easier. And for me, this kind of goes back to, because from 92 to 96 I was in the Navy, and so it kind of goes back to my Navy days, because we were kind of big on knots. And so I think that it's something that I'm gonna have a lot of fun with it because there's a lot of knots that I don't know how to tie, and I'm gonna do a lot of research. We're gonna figure out what those how important those knots are. And so Fridays are gonna be know your knots. And yeah, I mean, this is we got this little quick reference guide in one of our SHTF boxes, and yeah, we're gonna go through all the knots in this. I'm gonna do in depth into all of these knots, and this guide it's got some pretty good little introduction here. Knowing how to tie a few basic knots is an essential skill to add to your cache of knowledge. They're used for a million different tasks, and you already know how to use a couple of knots for everyday life, and that's all true. And then, of course, you got your glossary here, like, the bite, the loop, the crossing point, the standing in, the working in, the starting part, the standing part. And so, we'll go through, the different definitions for each knot. When I'm tying a knot, I'll tell you what each part of it is, whether it's, if it's the bite, if it's the loop, and so, I've also got a book in my Amazon cart. That's I've got a much larger book that goes into knots, and then there's a few knots that they talk about that are not in here, in the Bushcraft 101 that we got from the Dave Canterbury books. Talks about knots. Every survival book you're going to get is going to talk about knots, and I think that it's something that if you have a good video that shows you how to make the knot, and you can say, you know what, I remember how to make that knot. You know what? Let me go back to that crazy Texan guy, and let me see how he tied his knots, because I think that it's something that there's not enough. I don't think that there's enough knots on YouTube. because it's like whenever I try to find it, it's like there's so little hits. And so I think that this is something that, and I mean, as you can see, I've already got the days laid out as to to what knots I'm going to show you, and I've already got 31 knots ready to go, and so we're going to be doing a different knot every Friday, and we're not just and it's not just going to be with like quarters like this, but there's also a lot of knots that you have to use when you're fishing. And there's certain knots for fishing. There's certain knots for your ridge lines. There's certain knots that you want to know how to use. A lot of them make it a lot easier, and not only a lot easier to put up and take down, but also a lot more secure. Because a lot of times you may think you've tied a good knot, but it's not a good knot and it comes loose. If you tie the right knot at the right time, it's going to be a lot sturdier, and you're going to find out that it's going to be a lot easier than just trying to make something up. So, yeah, that's Friday. I'm pretty excited for it. I know that it may be kind of silly, but I love tying knots. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of fun for me. So, and hopefully it'll be fun for you. And it's like even if you only pick like out one or two that you really like, and then it's like what. It's like, okay, you know what? Now I know how to do that prusik knot. Oh, you know what? Now it's like, okay, yeah, the clove hitch, it's easy, it's really sturdy, and now my boat's not going to go down the river. So we're going to talk about all of that and more coming up on these Fridays. Until then, remember, keep prepping, keep thinking survival, because you never know what's going to happen when.